And what happens is they sit on their thumbs, and this is still true. Like some, the CEO of some company is saying, "Hey, what's our data? What's our AI strategy? Get on it!" And they figure they got to go hire somebody who understands data, and that's a data scientist, right? Well, guess what? Data scientists work really well when they've got lots of good data to work with. But if they don't have the good data to work with, you spend 350 grand a year, and someone's sitting on their thumbs. That's not a good use of funds. My recommendation is they do a data audit, and they use contractors to do that. That they actually come in with a blend of expertise. It's kind of like a startup, right? When you're starting a company, the typical motion is you go hire your buddy as an engineer because you trust your buddy. That guy was really good at computer science, and I was really good at poli science. So I'm not the right person to write the code.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Sean Languedoc, hopefully I pronounced it right, CEO and founder of Outforce.ai. Sean is a seasoned leader with 2 decades of experience in outsourcing, recruiting, known for his expertise in talent acquisition, leadership, and workforce strategies. Sean, thank you so much for being here, man. I'm excited to have you.
My pleasure, Avetis. Nice to meet you again.
Yeah, let's start with your journey. How did you get into this world? Why did you get into this world? And where are you now? And what are you trying to accomplish?
So let's be clear. I don't have 2 decades. I have 2 decades of experience doing it as the CEO of a tech company, looking for outsource as a user, and only about 5 years experience in running a staffing agency and converting that into what we are today. So yeah, I've built a bunch of tech companies, and in doing that, I always found that it was harder obviously hiring engineers, good engineers is hard because the good ones are always hired. So you got to take them away from where they're working and bring them to you. You can do that as you build relationships, and your engineering team itself is a great source of hiring engineers. But either way, it's a long process. And to get a pod together of engineers generally is about 12 months before they're a really high-performing cross-functional team. And that's why sometimes you want to outsource. And when you do that, you have the opposite problem of hiring. There's just too many choices. I mean, just look at your inbox on a daily basis. There's probably 5 or 10 unsolicited offers to build a web page or a mobile app or whatever. And so it's just noise. And so the truth is there's hundreds of thousands of them out there, and you don't know, it's hard to choose. And there's very little trust. So as an entrepreneur, having gone through it a few times, I decided to build a database on who's actually good at what and help companies filter through the noise to get the signals on who's got the right team with the right experience at the right time, at the right price to do what you want to do, and in the right time zone and all those other things. So that's what I built.
That's a big one, right? Because a lot of times the first thing people focus on is price. What's the cost? What's the price? Let's talk about that. Let's talk a little bit about quality versus price versus speed, which is something that most people want all three. It's kind of tough to do that. How do you deal with that concept?
Yeah, well, first of all, let's just be clear. Outsourcing is not necessarily offshoring. So a lot of people think outsource India. That's the first thing that comes to mind, or Ukraine. And it can be anywhere. It can be right next door. It could be like just downtown Los Angeles. There's probably 100 of them. So it really is the question of looking for speed to deliver an expertise that you don't have in-house. That's what you're ultimately doing it for. Trying to do it to leverage foreign exchange or cost in another country often ends in bad outcomes. And trust me, everybody's got a bad outcome story in outsourcing, me included. So, and not through a company I'm doing right now, but certainly in my experiences as a CEO of a tech company. And so I call it the trilemma, really. You've got 3 things, like you said: speed, quality, and price. You can only pick 2, right? And we don't recommend going for price first, because you end up rewriting or redoing what was built, unless you get really lucky. What we recommend is going for quality first. Once you have quality, it enables speed, because if you've got somebody who's built what you're doing in your tech stack and they've done it 10 times, they know your domain probably better than you do, and what nuances of product to build. They're contributing to the team instead of drawing from the team. where you're trying to teach them about the business and the business logic, or the rules of healthcare and HIPAA, or the rules of finance and charter bank. So it's really, if you get quality, you're going to get speed, and getting quality at the speed delivered is a question of how long it takes you to find that team. So that's where I go. And if you go for speed and price, that's the worst disaster.
Talk about tech debt, right? You're just asking for it, basically.
Yeah.
Now,
and that's those are the three things you sort of. It's like Gore-Tex, or breathable or waterproof, right? You're always giving up one for the other. You can't have fully waterproof and fully breathable.
Pick your poison. So easier said than done, right, Sean? So here we are. Let's say we're a startup company. For us, for example, we don't do too much seed and pre-seed startups. We don't. Hire Cloud doesn't work with too many. It's just too early, right? It's too early. Yeah. They usually don't have the monies, but they need work done. And usually they look at price, and they're getting referrals from partners, friends, whatever, and that's they're looking for, hey, what's the cheapest team I can get together? I need 5 people. How do you, what advice do you have for these folks that need to get something built quickly, but price is a major criteria? Should then they not worry about quality right now, and maybe they set that aside and just focus on price and speed?
Well, that's what you end up doing when you're hiring your first team anyway. You're really looking for full stack developer, more generalist kind of profiles, who can get shit done, and they'll bootstrap. They'll work for craft dinner and some equity, and that engineer that gets you the MVP, or at least POC, the proof of concept product, is not going to be the engineer through which you're going to scale. Sometimes you get lucky, and that engineer has the capacity to become more of a staff and CTO. But generally, the product that you build to get to product market fit is filled with technical debt because you've done so many iterations based on so many customer needs. That's inevitable. That's just part of the growth cycle. Eventually, that technical debt is too much of a burden on the system, and you're doing more tickets from client, from bugs and everything, than you are actually building your product. At that point, you've got to decide what you're going to do. That's another reason that you might want to outsource, because you've got to maintain your existing products, and your engineers are the best ones to fix those problems on an ongoing basis. So you bring in another team to build at scale something, and only if that team has built something similar and they're not having to learn the rules of the business, etc., like I described earlier, would you assign them perhaps on a new platform? I mean, a lot of people start on Ruby, and that gets pretty clunky after a while. So you want to move to a much more scalable framework, and then you've got to need a whole new engineering team. Then you bring over those engineers that you want to keep into the new system, and hire potentially replacements for the ones you don't.
Nice.
And that is often the case. So, but going back to your question about price again, I've seen it where you get lucky. Like we have a database of engineers all over the world, including in the United States, and or engineering companies that have engineering teams, and it's the trade-off, right? Like you definitely don't want to waste any time having to build something and then have your team rebuild it. You're just adding more technical debt later on. So getting that high quality will deliver a speed and a pace to the refactored product that you actually can get and take to market at a much higher quality and much less technical debt, which is what you're ultimately trying to get rid of because of doing this refactoring.
And what does Outforce specifically do? Is it working with companies like HireCloud who, let's say, have engineers, and you become a broker, a vetted broker of these organizations? How does it work?
Yeah, so we only work for the client's interest in selecting an agency. So we don't take any money from any of the agencies. Otherwise, that could diminish our independence in the perspective. And we basically walk them through a whole vetting process, which we do all the heavy lifting on, to get from hundreds of companies to whom we would ask if they would like to submit for what the client needs to get done. And this could be project, staff augmentation, whatever it is. and then we vet the teams that are presented before we let the client look at the agency. If an agency with the right credentials, they've done many projects in the space, they work in the same tech stack, they've got bench strength in the tech stack. But if they're submitting crappy candidates, they're off the list. I mean, clearly they're just their score will indicate that they're not going to be shortlisted. And the score, what we do is normalize all the data from all the different variables of quality of each of the line item contractors from that agency that are submitted for this project. And so what we narrow it down, quickly get them to is about the top 10 that they want to do some deeper dive and due diligence on. And that would be checking on their communication skills, references, etc. And then that might bring it down to 5. And so my client only needs to deal with the best agencies in the world out of literally, we have 80,000 that we start with. So we quickly narrow down based on a bunch of those tags. But, taking a 6-month project really in solicitation and reviews and everything down to the last 5, we generally get out of those 5, 3 companies that have a team that has built 4 at least projects in the same domain, and they work together and they're ready for their next project. That's the gold, because you get 1 + 1 in engineering when people have worked together is 5 times productivity. So you get a whole team, like it's hit the ground running.
Well, that's the key. You talked about delivering for, let's say, high quality projects in the domain or expertise. I think when we do hiring for companies, a lot of times the way we justify the cost, because we're a premium player in the space and it's already an expensive service. That executive search component is ramp up is so difficult and so expensive that if we can reduce ramp up by 6 months, believe me, we've 10 times saved you the money that you paid in any fees. So it's a similar concept in this case, that what you're doing is you're trying to find people that have already domain expertise, and that really does save time and eventually does save money as well, just not in the beginning, right?
That's right. And that's like you said, you there's no trust, so you go to your friend, right? Your friend. I'm in fintech, let's say, and my buddies had a really good experience with an outsourcing agency. Oh, they did health tech. Okay, that has no bearing whatsoever. Let's say they even had fintech. They just, like I said, might not have the right people at the right time. And that's the problem we have as entrepreneurs. And really it's usually the head of engineering, be it the current CTO of a team of 20 or the VP of engineering of a team of 60 who has, more than that in their company. But that person who's trying to get sprints done and do daily stand-ups and deliver product on the schedule that is normal has now the burden with the task of finding and risking the company's money and 6 months of its time on another outsourcing company. That's a really tough role. So you have limited time, which means you're not going to get a lot of data. You're going to quickly go to your friends and figure out who's good, and then you're going to get that same situation. So maybe you look at 6 companies. Maybe you do a little bit of online, right? You go online, you get the best marketed agencies, right? Simple as that. So either way, no matter who you talk to, the biggest mistake that most people make is they talk to the leadership of the company. And the leadership of the company, be it at a technical level or a business level, take those calls all day long. They know exactly what to say to make it sound like butter. It's just going to be such an easy project. We've done this so many times. And they haven't met the team yet. So if the company says we've got it all good and we know what to look for, they're just going to, and they don't have anybody, they're just going to find somebody and they're going to scramble the team together somehow. And it might take them a few months to get it right? Based on who they can get at the time, which is kind of a crappy way of doing things. So starting with a big database, moving it down to a small one, interviewing the bottom and moving up to the management of the company when you interview, and reverse engineering the question about what they actually do well. So you look at any one of the sites of any one of the agencies or phone any one of the agencies and say, hey, we got this fintech, we need payment, we need a Rails product, we're in .NET with React. Can you guys do that? Yes. They'll all say yes. Yeah. So we don't do that questioning. We have a reverse engineered question. As an example, we would say, we represent North American companies who are looking to increase their engineering capacity with outsourcing. We really like to have a really good match on business use. So if we were to bring you the perfect client, what business would my client be in? And then we get an honest answer. Oh yeah, we do marketplaces in B2B or B2C. Marketplace B2B, logistics, fashion, what kind of business are you in? Boom. So now we get the real solid answers. And that's how we tag the companies that we've put in our database.
That's perfect. Because you're matching not only business domain expertise, but you're matching potentially technology expertise as well, combining that, narrowing it down. Now, you're absolutely right. We do the same thing. When we interview people, it's not about a company, it's about themselves. Because what do you want, right? What are you great at? And then we'll match. Otherwise, what people are going to say, especially in times like this where we're in a semi-recession, they're going to say all the right things, right? To get the job or get the project, but really they're not happy and they're going to leave, or they don't have the expertise needed to do a great job long term. That's really good. Let's talk a little bit about horror stories. We've all heard, people have been burnt by offshore or outsourcing agencies, and now they're forever kissed it goodbye. And unfortunately, it's not always the right thing to do, but that this is one bad experience. So they heard someone had a bad experience. Let's talk about some of those and why do those experiences happen? As a CEO, I'm sure you even dealt with it, no?
Oh yeah. Oh, totally. Now, I would say at the end of the day, it's really about communications. And that is a nuance. That answer has multiple lines of truth. So first is, what we match on culture as another example of the things that we look for. What's the style of business of the client? Are they, mercenaries or missionaries? Or are they looking at quality of lifestyle as well as quality of product? Or are they just guns ablaze and we got to get this out and we don't give a shit about anything but getting it done? And we look for the culture of the vendor on the same side, right? And the complexity, or how they approach complexity. Are they looking for people who are problem solvers or just doers, right? Line item players. And so different teams will have different versions of that as a vendor, but also different countries culturally have different versions of that as vendors. So you go to Southeast Asia, for example, and that just does not jive with North American culture. It's a very hierarchical society where there's a lot of deference. Not asking questions in a sprint is just not, and challenging in sprint is just something that we do normally here. But over there, you don't ask questions. You don't challenge the boss. You
just do it. You do it. It's a yes sir culture. The problem is the results don't come in, and then again they're not allowed to take accountability and say, I messed up. What do you mean you messed up? You're not allowed to mess up. You almost go in circles, where I've noticed that they will explain that they'll go in circles, especially now with ChatGPT. They can very, very beautifully communicate how it's actually your fault or is no fault of theirs why things didn't get done.
Explain that quite well enough. And that's the thing. But if you know, and that's, by the way, a sweeping generalization.
Of course.
Because there are incredible teams in those countries.
Of course.
That are just bulletproof, rock solid teams.
And I have some of those teams, by the way, so I'm well aware. Yes.
But knowing that going into a large organization or an organization you're not too sure about allows you to be prepared. And if you're prepared and you can actually, really scope things out in minute detail, then that works really well in those kinds of environments. Or if it's rinse and repeat activities, then once they learn it once, they'll be really good at it the next time. Flip over to the other side of the world, and you get into sort of the Eastern European kind of mindset, and they will. And this is again sweeping generalization and cultural nuances between countries, of course, but they're really forthright and can be sometimes acidic in a relationship, because they'll tell you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, and they'll tell you why, and they might be right. They're really, really good engineers over there. So it really depends. And then you get the Latin, South American, and LATAM you get really lively and very warm cultures.
Yes.
And so it's sort of a happy in between. And it's really a question of the quality of the engineering of that company.
Sean, I know this is an odd question because you shouldn't decide this based on this next question, but there's a lot of focus on nearshoring now, right? Because, and rightfully so. I mean, I have a team in Brazil and Colombia, and it's wonderful because the hours are non-existent. If they work a little bit late, I guess you could say, basically there is no delay, but other things should be considered. So if I'm a startup, if I'm any company trying to decide the region, one, should I even think about a region? Should I even focus on a region? Or should I just focus on the problems I'm trying to solve? What's the right kind of thought process and questions I should be asking to determine whether I'm doing it in India, I'm doing it in Ukraine or Armenia or something like that, or I'm doing it in Latin America? What are some of those questions?
That's an excellent question. I love that question. So the first answer is time zone. Don't think about country, think about time zone. How do you work and how much time do you need with the vendor in real time on Zoom or whatever the case is? If you can live with a halo time zone, then Eastern Europe, you can go as far as Eastern Europe. If you need closer to real time, then you have to go south or north. Canada, by the way, has a close to a 40% discount on currency exchange rate. So it's a pretty nice place, and we give tax credit. I mean, I'm in Canada, so I'm kind of biased, but there are tax credits as well that you can benefit from, albeit less than if you were actually setting up in Canada.
And I'm guessing the cultural nuances and differences are nearly zero, right?
Zero difference. Yeah. Zero difference.
Yeah, and I didn't realize the cost savings is so massive, because to me, that's these days with costs going up across the globe, that's basically Latin American prices, if I'm correct.
That's on Forex. Yeah. Canadians will charge you outside of the United States. You will generally get charged US dollars. In Canada, we're used to charging Canadian dollars, so it's quite favorable. Yeah. So the first answer is time zone. Figure out what makes most sense for you to best communicate and operate with that vendor. Because don't forget, if you're forcing someone in India or Vietnam, wherever it is, that is 12 hours away to work your hours, you're going to have a huge churn rate, because those workers will eventually find somewhere else to work.
They're only doing it temporarily to almost come out of the cold, right?
Right.
And that's all this is.
That's right. So think about how you work and how it's going to impact how they work, and the happiness factor. Because if somebody's happy about working, they're going to stick around. But if they're unhappy because they can't see their family or whatever it is, it's not going to work out. So that's time zone. Then the second thing is, don't pick a geography. Don't pick a country. I give this analogy. Look, if you're from Mexico and you want to start a hockey team, you throw a dart in Canada, right? Canadians got a lot of hockey players. You land that dart on me? No, I'm a skier. You're going to have a terrible hockey team. So don't pick on geography. Pick the team that has all the right credentials in the time zone that you want. And then let geography determine whether there's a price advantage in that country and a cultural nuance that is closer to your own culture in that country, especially with that team. So those are the two things that a lot of people make mistakes on. They try and pick a country and limit it to that country. There are phenomenal engineers all around the world. You just got to pick the right team.
I agree with you. When we were picking our and this is for internal hiring, but when we try to pick a Latin American country, we just literally dropped the pin in Colombia, and we built an original team there. Then we started hiring in Brazil, and the truth is they're all wonderful. In Europe, it happened to be Armenia. In Asia, it happened to be India. But you're absolutely right. The focus should be the kind of people you want, and the I guess you said the halo of time zone. So then time zone should be a huge factor when you
100%.
get started. Okay.
Oh yeah, 100%. Unless you are equipped to run a team. Now, another way to do Southeast Asia on an opposite time zone is to, if you're big enough, to hire somebody from that market as your team lead, bring him or her into your own company for a while, set that up so they understand your culture, or maybe you already have somebody from that country that you could hire in the United States. And because there's for example, there's thousands of Indians that have come over with Infosys and all the big companies, and they've broken off into smaller agencies. You could hire out of that pool, and if that person wants to go back to India, then set that up out there, and then hire around that person or contract around that person.
Sean, to that point, I mean, there's such an important factor that we should be thinking about. One of the reasons that technology executives who are relatively happy in their careers will leave a career, and we could actually headhunt them to join another company, is the hours they work, right? So too often we hear, I work 8 to 5, 8 to 6, then I got to go home, have dinner, then I've got to connect back from 9 to 11. And that's the number one reason. And we will accept that as a good reason for leaving. I was like, wow. I mean, I could just imagine my wife and I having these arguments, right? Like, hey, and it's just bad for your family, frankly, right? Like, you're just going to come home, have dinner, and then you're going to get back and work. And it's just not a healthy, sustainable way to live, I think. So I don't blame those people for leaving. It's one thing to do it once a week for an hour, or even 2. It's once a month or whatever, but daily, wow, that would put a drain. So you really have to know what you have, and you don't want to save money or to move things along, put this type of strain on your most important people, right?
Exactly right. Yeah. And the CEO that can do that. I know a bunch of CEOs who work basically 24. Oh my God. They've got teams in Australia, they got teams in Macedonia, they got teams everywhere, and they're up at 4 and midnight taking the last call.
That's rough. I work harder than most people I know, and I don't think I can handle that. To me, an email response at 7 or 8 p.m. for 10 seconds is not a huge deal, but having to stay on call for 2-3 hours at a time is not fun, I'm sure. Let's talk a little bit, Sean. A lot of companies are struggling with what I call FOMO, and specifically AI FOMO. Right? Everybody wants to be a part of it. They're reading stories, they're reading articles, they're listening to podcasts that you're either, AI is part of your strategy or AI will replace you, right? This is the thing. And the truth is, there is some truth to that, right? You have to embark on this AI journey early enough so you can get the learnings early enough. But that all being said, Tell me why we shouldn't necessarily immediately jump on the bandwagon of hiring data engineers or data scientists or AI engineers to take on projects for us.
That's a really good, and that is a phenomenon that's happening. You're absolutely right. I guess it's people, and I saw this a lot. I was bringing in data scientists from South Africa and the Middle East, where they're just genius mathematicians, to Canada back in 2019 and 2020 before COVID, and some of these companies would just hire them because they needed a data scientist on their deck to get the money raised, right? And what happens is they sit on their thumbs, and this is still true. Like some, the CEO of some company is saying, "Hey, what's our AI strategy? Get on it," and they figure they got to go hire somebody who understands data. And that's a data scientist, right? Well, guess what? Data scientists work really well when they've got lots of good data to work with. But if they don't have the good data to work with, you spend $350,000 a year, and someone's on their thumbs. That's not a good use of funds. So my recommendation is they do a data audit, and they use contractors to do that. That they actually come in with a blend of expertise. It's kind of like a startup, right? When you're starting a company, the typical motion is you go hire your buddy as an engineer because you trust your buddy, and that guy was really good at computer science, and I was really good at poli science. So I'm not the right person to write the code. So the same thing with engineering. It's and you build a proof of concept. There's another way to do that is to go hire a contracting company. You don't have to give them any equity. they'll deliver with that contracting company fractional use of a senior architect, fractional use of a senior UX UI person, fractional uses of a DevOps and cloud architecture. So you get this whole gamut of really senior expertise for which you're only needing and only using a fraction of their time. And then once you build out what you actually need to build, then you put the heavy lift into DevOps and front-end engineers and everything else you need, and you can hire them. So it really master plans a hiring strategy based on what you actually want to build. Same thing in data. Don't go in with a data scientist who has no data to work with. You need someone who can do data operations, data architecture. Maybe you just need a statistician, right? So there are some boutique firms out there that do data audits and then can give you that strategy. Sure. For the cost of one data scientist. You get 5 people who are all experts, fractional use, and then they deliver to you in a nice little box the plan for execution on your data, the 5-year plan, and who you need to hire and when. It's way cheaper and gets a much better result.
In other words, don't let the tail wag the dog, right?
Yeah.
In this case, you got a pitch deck issue, which is if at most a tail, and it's going to wag the dog into making bad decisions, and it's not necessary. You want to put something on your deck, get an advisor, right? Get an advisor who's an expert in that world. One they'll guide you to, maybe they'll allow you to be on their pitch deck. I'm on right. quite a few pitch decks, and I've done my share of advising. Sean, what interesting question for you. How do you define success beyond just revenue growth in a company like yours? Like for us, one of the things we did is we did talk about data. We looked at like 5-6 years of historical hiring on our executive search side of the business, and we did some growth analysis in the people we placed and how long they stayed. So for us, we were proud to say, hey man, our people stayed 2.3 times longer than the industry average, which in tech isn't that impressive, but it's still very impressive, right? And I think we found out that like 35% of those people had gotten promotions within a year. So these are all like small signs, well, they're big signs of long-term success. That's how we measured how we're doing as a kind of a middleman almost, right? Mm-hmm. How do you measure and gauge if you're truly making an impact in your type of business?
It's all about execution. I mean, you can say anything you like, but execution is the measurement of success. And for me, the reason I built this company is because I had suffered the pain of outsourcing, and I didn't want anyone else to suffer that. So my mantra is I don't want any entrepreneur or any company to waste time talking to agencies that are a waste of time. And an agency that is a waste of time could be a really good agency, but they just don't have the right people. There's many ways that these can be the waste of time. That is not the best use of your time. Best of use of your time is to take a short list of the best agencies and figure out which one fits you the best. So that's number one in terms of my mantra, my sort of mission. In terms of what is success measured, the average success rate of an outsourcing project is similar to hiring. It's less than 50%, right? Yeah. So we've got a 98% hit rate. And the reason we only have the 2% off is not because the team wasn't good and didn't execute. It's because 1 or 2 of the people that are selected in the team that the agency has hid in the interview process their soft skills, right? That technically, obviously, the resumes all worked out. But in terms of the interview process, because we generally do a team interview process so they can understand the dynamics of how they communicate, not just with you, but also with each other. Our clients are welcome to do one-on-one interviews after that, but sometimes somebody can hide in that process and they might not have the soft skills. They might be not demonstrative enough, or they don't take criticism well. So it's really not their technical skill, it's their team skill. And you can only find that out after execution. So what's nice about it is we always select companies that have enough bench strength in the tech stack that we know we can replace, let's say, Juan with Carlos, right? Or Yuri with Igor. So there's all kinds of ways that we mitigate against that risk. So that's number one, is we have a 98% hit rate versus a less than 50% in the market. Number 2 is speed. We take what would normally take somebody on their own with a limited data set 6 months before they selected, onboarded, and started having production. And it might take them 3 months before they realize they got the wrong team. So you could have a 9-month disaster. And it's not the money you lost, it's the time you've wasted. In our case, we can get a team presented, or many teams presented, so you're dealing with a short list within 3 weeks, based on the scalability and the rapidity of our repeated process. We know what bullshit factors to look for real quick. We filter that out and we get to the short list real quick. So, comparing what it would take to build your own team 9 months, 3 weeks, and 98% hit rate. That's our success metrics.
That's huge. And how did you determine the 98%?
The 90%?
98%.
Every project so far has customer delight, with the exception of 1 or 2 engineers within one of the companies that have been selected. Yeah.
That's awesome. Sean, where can people find you? No, this is good. Yeah. I know
in Canada, right?
In Eastern European countries, like you mentioned, former Soviet, you get great C++ engineers with computer science degrees, strong math understanding. That's kind of what I was looking for. Where do people find you if they want to connect with you, if they want to potentially look into your service? Yeah,
so they can find me at Outforce.ai, Sean, Sean, at Outforce.ai. Very soon I'll be publishing a series of videos and playbooks for how to avoid the mistakes. So it's called the Definitive Guide to Outsourcing. And that'll be available. If you send me an email, I'll flip you the links. And that would whether you use our service or not, I really don't. I mean, obviously, I'd love you to use our service, save you a lot of time. But I really, like I said, don't want anyone to waste time. So I've got all the tricky questions that you can ask to filter out the bullshit. I've got all the ways that you normally would make a mistake and how to avoid those mistakes. So I got a lot of playbooks that I can help you out with.
Wonderful. Sean, you've been great. Thank you so much for being here. And I know I learned a lot. And hopefully the folks did as well.
Thanks, Avetis. I enjoyed talking to you and hope it was helpful.
Take care, brother. Thank you so much. And that brings us to the end of another great episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. I want to thank you for joining us and hope you took away some valuable insights to apply in your professional journey. Don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform so you don't miss out on the next great conversation. I promise it'll be good. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd appreciate if you could leave us a review. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps others discover the podcast. Better leaders mean better working environments. Better working environments leads to happier people. Remember, a rising tide lifts all boats. I'm Avetis Antaplyan, and this has been the Tech Leaders Playbook. Keep leading, keep learning, keep giving, and I'll see you on the next one. Until then, stay inspired, my friends.